Okay, thanks. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We are here to talk about the technical assistance new application version that OWEB has put together. This is the first of 4 webinars that OWEB will put on, one webinar for each application type. So the agenda for today is we're going to spend about 10-15 minutes just providing you some context, why we changed it, how we got here, what changed and what didn't change, what offerings is this applicable to. And then we're going to spend most of the webinar actually in the application, walking through all the changes that we did. And then concurrently, we're going to be also offering up some tips and some guidance to hopefully help you submit competitive applications, since that's really our goal here. And then we are going to be offering office hours. So after each webinar, the webinars are going to be every Thursday starting today. And then the following week, we're going to have an hour where we just offer an office hours, where we are just logging on to Zoom and here to help answer questions and field anything that we might have missed during the webinar. Anything to add, Liz?
Nope.
Okay.
You got it covered.
All right. So why change? We have heard from a lot of folks, applicants, review team members, that our applications are redundant, repetitive, long, and we're also an agency that's very much focused on continuous improvement. So we initially launched these online applications in 2016. So it's been 8 years since we've launched these applications, and it's certainly time to revise them and make them more approachable for you all, and easier for our review team members to also review. Another key aspect of why we changed it was up until now, we were collecting metrics as part of the applications. So we no longer need to collect metrics at time of application. It's not necessary for the review of the application. And so we don't need to do that. And so consequently, that allowed us to take out a lot of questions that were in the application that were associated with metrics. If a grant does get funded, and it does have a connection with an anadromous species, there is potential that you might have to report metrics once the grant is funded. More to come on that later on. Anything to add, Liz?
Nope.
It's not. The space bar doesn't work anymore.
Oh, try your arrow, maybe.
Huh. Well, let's go ahead and reshare that. You gotta love the technology glitches. I think I got it figured out. Sorry, folks. Okay, back to the regular scheduled programming. So how do we do it? So we assembled a group of people at OWEB to assist with this. So we got folks from across each section of the agency. So we had the IT folks, we had the technical group, we had a fiscal staff member. At the time, we had our climate specialists participate. So we had this representative of all the different groups at OWEB, in addition to having a review team member participate with us, which was key to kind of have their perspective. And so as we were going through the application and trying to figure out, what we wanted to change, we had to make sure that we were making changes that were going to be appropriate for how our evaluation criteria reads, how our rules are in statute. These are things that, we had to, make sure that we revised the questions that were crosswalking those. And so we had our criteria in front of us when we were, looking at questions. Does this question still make sense? Could we word this question a little bit differently so it's more applicable for what our criteria is? And so after we did all this, we actually went through quite a bit of testing. Some of you probably tested externally. We had quite a bit of internal testing before we let external folks get a look at it. And so we really wanted to make sure that we had a pretty broad suite of people looking at the applications before we actually kind of turned them on live. Liz, anything to add?
Nope, you covered it.
Okay. Let's see if I can. Okay. So this slide is a really important one. It's just it's a reminder that when it comes to projects that we are able to fund, you have to make a clear connection to what is in statute. And so on the left side of the screen, you have what is in statute: benefits to fish, wildlife, water quality. So the projects you see on the right, so technical assistance, engagement, monitoring, these projects, we're only allowed to fund them if they make a clear line and connection to those benefits that are outlined in statute. So that is something that we hammer into our review teams. And it's just a reminder for everybody today to be mindful of that. When you're going through the application, you have projects in mind, that connection has to be abundantly clear. And if you have any concerns or questions, please reach out to somebody at OWEB to vet out your idea, and they can certainly help you as you think about a project type to make sure it's eligible for the use of our funds. Anything to add, Liz?
We can move forward.
All right, if I can figure this out.
You're doing great.
Okay, so let's get down to it. What changed and what didn't change? You'll recall we have different sections in our application. So where we were able to make changes was in the problem statement, the proposed solutions, and the wrap-up sections. This is what I would consider the kind of core of the application. What we didn't change, we didn't change the administrative section, we didn't change the budget page, and we didn't change the funding and match page. And you might be thinking to yourself, gosh, I really wish OWEB would also change those items in their applications, and we do too. And we're going to get there. The reason why we couldn't change the administrative budget and funding and match pages because those parts of the application are a part of every application that OWEB puts out the door. So it has a much broader reach and much more of an impact on OWEB business as a whole. And so those parts of the application are going to take a little bit more fine tuning, particularly the budget page. As you all know, the budget page is a kind of a complicated page to work and navigate through. There's a lot of coding and IT work behind the scenes. And so, we didn't have the time, to be frank, to get through those parts of the application. But what we did have time and what we did have the space and the ability to do was look at the problem statement, look at the proposed solutions and the wrap-up sections, and where can we, reduce redundancy, improve efficiency, improve clarity, provide better guidance, and get rid of questions that, frankly, none of us need at time of application for the review. So that's what we're going to focus the presentation on today, is these three parts of the application. But stay tuned. We're going to change the other parts of the application, just not yet, but soon. It's definitely on our minds to do so. So just kind of wanted to kind of let everybody know where we are and where we hope to be in the future. So stay tuned on what didn't change. So right now, these new application versions are only applicable for the open solicitation grant offering. So it's likely that more offerings will use these applications versions come fall of 2024. And the reason we have fall 2024 listed is because I talked a little bit about the metrics. So right now, our IT staff is creating a database where funded projects, if they are required to report metrics, will access this database to input their metrics for those projects. And so we can't allow any other offerings to use these application versions because all the metric questions are gone. You're gonna be pretty excited to see the removal of all those questions. And so the metrics database that OWEB is working on will be completed in the fall 2024. So it's likely that other offerings, like, folks who might work in the FIP environment and other grant offerings at OWEB, will be able to use those moving forward. But for right now, it's only for the open solicitation spring 2024 cycle. I miss anything, Liz?
No, you covered it. And there's been quite a few new people that joined. So I just wanted to remind folks that if you have any questions, feel free to put those into chat and I will be moderating that and queuing up questions for Greg throughout the presentation.
Super. Thank you. Okay, so I think at this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to open up our online application just like you would when you were going to apply for a grant. And we're going to walk through the highlighted changes. So stay tuned, cross your fingers that my technology works well for everybody. Okay, so you all should see the
We,
front page. You see
yes,
it?
we see your application.
Wonderful. Okay. So after you log in, you select a spring 2024 grant cycle, and you should have the option to select 4 different grant applications: technical assistance, engagement, monitoring, restoration. Today, we're focusing on the technical assistance application. And so these are our categories within our application. Remember, we only changed problem statement, proposed solution, and wrap up. We didn't change the administrative page, budget, funding and match, the permit, road, plant page. We also didn't change those either. So we're going to focus our conversation today in these 3 sections. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the problem statement and get us started here. So right off the bat, you're going to notice that the problem statement question looks a lot different than it did in the past. In the past, there used to be 2 problem statement questions. So when we were going through the process of trying to determine how we can, revise these applications to be more streamlined and add more clarity, we were able to incorporate those into 1 question. I'm going to go ahead and click on the I button and talk a little bit about our changes in the I button guidance. Liz, I just want to make sure you can see the I button.
We can see the I button.
Okay, super. So all the I buttons got completely revamped. So the I buttons are going to always include the questions in our evaluation criteria that are applicable to this question. And they're also going to include at least 1 example. Sometimes they will include kind of overarching themes to consider when you're answering the question. So for this one, I really want to stress that what we're looking for here is primarily the problems at your project site, not necessarily the system as a whole. Like we understand the dams on the Columbia are a problem. We understand sheep grazing in the 1850s was a problem. We understand there's 2% of oak left in the Willamette Valley. This question is really geared towards getting at the specific problem at your project site and helping us understand, what the impacts are on that specific site. That really helps tailor um, the issue that the reviewer is trying to understand. So as they're going through your application, they're being mindful of, what is exactly the issue, problem, stressor that this application is trying to answer. Um, You'll also notice that we took a look at our character limits and revised them pretty significantly. Um, all of our character limits for most questions were around 8,000 character limits. And I want to stress that just because there are now 5,000 character limits doesn't mean you have to give us 5,000 character limits of text. In fact, I would argue that more is not always better. And I think, answering questions in a grant application is kind of part art and part science. And I think there's a ton of value in being clear, concise, and to the point when you're answering the questions. The more kind of like background and kind of noise in the back that is distracting from the actual thing that you're trying to answer just confuses the people on the other end who are reviewing the applications. So I can't stress enough: clear, concise, and to the point. um, so this next question is a new one, actually. And this is really geared towards helping us understand why technical assistance is required at the project site. It could be a variety of reasons. It could be you need to hire expertise that you don't have, whether that's an engineer, cultural resource surveys, surveyors, people who have GIS experience. It allows us to better understand the technical assistance need that is demanded to be able to implement your project. So project history, this is not a new section. So I would focus that these part of the application is broken down into two questions. One, we're asking you if it's a continuation or a phased of your project. And two, we're asking if it was a resubmittal from a past project you submitted that didn't get funded. So if you go ahead and click yes, to the continuation phase, it'll ask you, briefly describe what was completed, and then also identify all the grant numbers that are applicable. Um, and I can't again stress the need to be clear, concise, and direct when answering these. If it was a resubmit and you're reapplying, we certainly want to know the grant numbers. This is not new. But what is new is that we just have a sentence here to ask you to briefly describe how the concerns were addressed. So previous versions of the application would have each section of the application where you were allowed to fill in, like, okay, in the problem statement, what are your changes? In the proposed solution sections, what are your changes? And it's kind of hard to follow. And what we don't want you to do is tell us exactly how everything changed from the past submittal. But what we do want you to tell us is we changed the budget and the change is on the budget page. We changed objectives 3 and 4, and the new data is on the actions page, not objectives. We'll get there. So again, just kind of keep it high level and helping us understand, where in the application it changed and what, and then the reviewer knows exactly where to go. And you can see the I button for guidance. Um, Okay, moving on down to the plans section. These questions got changed a little bit. A couple things to point here. The first question here, we're asking you for, what's the applicable and appropriate plan that you're working off of. And what I want to stress here is that we're not looking for every plan under the sun that identified your project as something to do to implement the plan. I would suggest and promote that the most applicable and appropriate and timely plans is the best thing to put here. You know, plans from 20, 25 years ago just may not have a lot of relevance. So I would just be mindful with, you know, certainly want to know, you know, the plans that were identified that your project is implementing off of, but just to be mindful that when you put too many plans, it starts to lose the impact, if you will. Because in the second question, it asks you specifically how you are going to, how your project is going to implement those actions identified in those plans. And so you kind of have to make that crosswalk. So if you list 12 plans, you have to then crosswalk how your project relates to each of those 12 plans. So again, keeping on the clear, concise, and direct methodology of answering the questions. um, I would focus on that. And so we offer a couple of examples here. You know, if you're working in the mid-sea steelhead area and that's the only plan that you list, there's nothing wrong with that. Um, Nothing wrong with that. And so again, in the second question, um, we have the criteria listed here, and then we have an example of how you can articulate how your project is implementing an action specified in the plan that you identified. Liz, anything to add on to?
Nothing to add and no questions so far, but maybe we just could pause for a moment and give people a chance. If you have any questions on this page, feel free to put them into chat before we roll into the next page. So let me just pause for a moment. And I'm not seeing any come in, so maybe we can move forward.
Okay. Let's get to the proposed solutions page. And you're going to notice a lot of changes here. So we are first asking for the goal of technical assistance at your project site. Um, Really want to emphasize that a goal statement is really just that. It should be no more than one or two sentences long. Oftentimes we see paragraphs inputted here, and you know, a goal, looking at the I button, it really helps sets the stage for what you're trying to achieve with your project. So we have our evaluation criteria that we listed here, and then just an example of how you can think of a goal statement. What I would also emphasize too is that when a goal statement is only one or two sentences, it's clear. It's very direct and specific on what you want to achieve with the project. The challenge with identifying that and then kind of articulating why this is your goal and what you're going to do as part of this, you start to muddy the intent of what your goal statement is. And that just can offer a little bit of confusion from the person reviewing the application. So I would really stress that the goal statement for all of our applications should be that one or two sentences, very high level, very specific and direct, um, and not elaborate into anything else. How you're going to do it and what you're going to do, that all comes later. This is your elevator pitch. If you had, you know, two floors to explain to somebody what you wanted to do, this is your shot. So again, I would advocate to keep it high level, you know, one or two sentences long. Um, so after you identify your goal, so this previously used to be called objectives. We changed the wording to action. We felt action was a little bit more representative in terms of what we are asking for. And action is something that you do, something that you implement. And so these plus signs, as everybody knows, you can add on as many actions as you wish. You'll again notice that we have I buttons for each of these. And so, you know, an action should be quantifiable. And because we don't have metrics into the grant applications anymore, I want to stress to be as articulate as possible with quantifying your project outcomes. So if an action could be, um, I want to survey 2.2 miles of stream, um, that can be a quantifiable action. I want to survey 480 acres for noxious weeds. Thinking about that quantifiable metric that helps us, kind of provide a scale of what you're trying to achieve. And then here is you're telling us how you're going to actually implement it. So a quantifiable action should also be the same length as a goal statement. It should only be 1 or 2 sentences long. It should not be overly elaborate. We don't want to know how you're going to do it. We just want to know what you want to do. The how part is here with describing how the action will be implemented. And again, if you go to the I button guidance, we have the evaluation criteria that this part of the application is applicable to. And then we have an example of, the type of information, the level of information, the detail of information that would be, considered an appropriate response for answering this. And so, yeah, you can go ahead and you can add as many as you wish. Of course, if you get confused and you don't like that one, you could also just delete that and it'll be deleted. Um, so this is considered our goals and actions sections instead of our goals and objectives section, which was the previous version. So this next part of the proposed solution is new, something we're pretty excited about. We had, if you'll recall, 2 tables in the grant applications. We had an elements table, which allowed you to put in your tasks, like what you're going to do, and then how like the duration, the start and end date. And then we also had a project manager table, which allowed you to input the people who are going to be involved in your application. And so when the group of us were kind of going through and looking at ways to, reduce redundancy and streamline these applications, we thought, hey, it'd be really awesome if we can marry these 2 tables together and kind of ask that information in one table. And so this is what we came up with. And so, in theory, the actions that you identify here will be the actions that you identify here. Now, you're probably asking yourself, gee, it'd be really slick if I were able to input this action here and it would auto-populate in the project work plan. Totally agree. I think it'd be awesome. Unfortunately, the technology constraints that we had didn't allow us to do that. So you're going to have to re-input your action here. But again, these actions should only be 1 or 2 sentences long. Um, so hopefully that's not too much of a redundancy piece. But here you're able to input your action, the responsible entity that's going to implement that action, the role of that person implementing the project, the qualifications piece, the experience. This is a pretty key part for our review team members to understand that the people involved are the right people, they have the right sets of experience and the knowledge to implement the project. And then you have the start and end date here to kind of give us that timestamp of when you anticipate to achieve that action. And so we call this the project work plan table because it kind of really is just that. Somebody can probably come to the work plan table and get a really great sense on what you're trying to do. You're going to miss how you're implementing the action, but that's going to be right up here. So that was a pretty big change from the last iterations of the application. Again, we have I button here. Um, so one thing I do want to stress, if you don't know who the responsible entity is, that would be a good point where you can elaborate on the qualifications and types of experiences that you're looking for. Certainly, it's very plausible that you can, at time of application, not know who your contractor or consultant's going to be. But as long as we know what kind of experiences and expertise you're looking for, that that will help the review of the application undoubtedly. And of course, there's the evaluation criteria that's applicable to what we are looking for here and making that crosswalk to what's in the application versus what's in our criteria. After our work plan table, this is where you get to choose your destiny. You're either going to go to technical design and engineering, or you're going to do resource assessment and planning. Um, and so I see that I have resource assessment and planning checked. Liz, because of Zoom, I have this little label thing over it. Is that what is um,
Yeah, it's you have resource assessment and planning selected. Is it not letting you go into it?
well, I have this little banner here below my screen. Maybe I can move it. There we go. Okay.
There you go.
Okay, so we're going to go through each of these, but maybe I can pause before we get into resource assessment and planning. Liz, did I miss anything?
No, we don't have any questions in chat. I think the only thing I would just emphasize about the new table is that it was intended to be a space that where you can really bring together the actions, the people, the timeline, and even be able to provide information about your budget. So part of the reason why we did it this way is that we were noticing that for reviewers, seeing how all the connections between those pieces are coming together can be really difficult in the old application. And so, for example, if there's a person whose position is being funded in the budget, they hopefully would show up in this table and provide context as to why funds are being requested for that person. We found those connections were often hard to make with the previous application format. So this table is really meant to bring all those parts together so that reviewers can see the whole picture of the project from actions to people to budget items, and they should all be connected somehow. And do have a question in chat. Can you provide some more detail on responsible party?
Yeah. So responsible entity. So what we're looking at here is trying to understand who is going to be responsible for implementing the action that you identify here. So this could be a contractor, this could be staff, this could be volunteers, it could be anybody. I think this space allows you as an applicant to help us understand who is going to be responsible for implementing the action that you identify here. Anything to add on that, Liz?
We got to thank you on that one. So I think we covered it.
And I only
And,
operate off of one screen at home, so I'm sorry, I'm a little bit constrained on some level. Cool.
and I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think you can go into the types now.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and hit resource assessment and planning. And wow, this is it. This really is it. Only 2 questions, and they're specific to data management. So previous applications, we had 4 questions that touched upon data. We were able to look at those 4 questions and concise them into 2. So I feel like these are pretty straightforward. What data will be collected, and in the I button guidance here, this should be reflective of what you identified under the goals and certainly under the actions part of the application. This plant data, hydrology, fish, wildlife, topography, cultural resources, whatever it might be. What kind of data are you collecting? And then the second question is describe how the data collected will be managed and shared. And so again, I think this question or an iteration of it was in the previous application, but we just, want to better understand how the data that you collect is going to be managed, shared, and used amongst your partners to develop the product that you're hoping to develop. Again, criteria here is listed under the I button guidance, and you have an example of a way on how you can answer this question that is considered appropriate. So yeah, believe it or not, that's the only 2 questions that are under resource assessment and planning. So let's go back to proposed solution and take a look at the technical design and engineering. Um, So this is kind of a funny thing here. If I go ahead and select technical design engineering, it still says resource assessment and planning here. I understand that could be a little frustrating, but the good old refresh button will change that to technical design and engineering. Our IT folks know of this little glitch, but I wanted to make sure that if you go down one path and decide you want to go down a different path, um, go ahead and click what path you want to go down. And if it doesn't show up here, just go ahead and click the refresh button and it will pop up. So let's take a look at technical design and engineering. Um, so we worded this question a little bit differently. We always thought it was a little bit wonky on how it was worded, but essentially what we're asking for is what level of design will be produced as a result of this application. Um, so what are you going to produce if this application is funded and implemented? If you select conceptual design or preliminary design, a pop-up question will come up and it will ask, what is your plan to achieve final design? This gives the reviewer some sense and understanding if you're only going to achieve conceptual or preliminary designs, what is your plan moving forward to get to that final design stage? So this is an opportunity for you to elaborate on your pathway after this project is completed to get to final designs. It could be applying for a future OWEB grant. It could be, hey, we have match funding that's going to allow us to finish out the design. Whatever it might be, this is a space for you all to elaborate on how you're going to get to that final design. Again, we have iButton guidance here. Pretty straightforward. Hopefully that's clear. If you select final design, then that pop-up window goes away. And I think everybody is aware now, but we no longer have a $75,000 cap on our technical assistance grants. So if you wanted to apply for bringing a design all the way from the beginning to final, you can now do that because there's no budgetary restraint, no cap that limits you to do, ultimately what you want to do. And there's also the match has been reduced from 25% down to $1. So we removed a couple barriers where I think we hope that if folks want to do design work, that they ask for all the design work at the first stage of the project. So hopefully that's clear. Um, so this next question here is kind of helping us understand what types of alternatives you all will think through when you're kind of going through your design analysis. So it could be driven by environmental compliance and permitting. It could be driven by, other types of constraints. Whatever alternatives that you all are considering, this is a place where you can elaborate on what those different alternatives are and why you are moving forward with the selected alternative. Um, and again, there's an iButton guidance here to help you understand what we're kind of asking for in this question, evaluation criteria that is applicable to this question, and then an example of how you might answer this question.
We do have a couple of questions in chat. One is going back to the data collection. So data collection refers to which portion of the project? Data collected over the duration of the technical assistance phase or after project implementation/completion? So that'd be
Yeah,
under resource assessment and planning.
yeah, good question. So what we're asking for here in this section is data specific to what you're asking for in the technical assistance application. So if you're looking to collect data to help build a design, looking to collect data to understand the physical and biological characteristics of your site, that's the type of data that we're looking for in this section is what type of data are you going to need, collect, and analyze that's going to feed into your resource assessment and planning. Um, so I think not post implementation data collection. That is uh, a different stage of the project. This is focused really on the data that is needed and required to help you build out that resource assessment and restoration plan.
Great. We have one more. What's the best way to show that we have leveraged other funding sources to support our project if there is now only a $1 match requirement?
Great question. And we certainly want to make sure that people do that because it does help the reviewer a long way. One of our evaluation criteria is capacity of applicant. And so under the capacity of applicant evaluation criteria, are the right people involved? Are the right players kind of at the table, and leveraging those outside resources is a way to demonstrate that. And so while we didn't change this part of the application, under the funding and match page would be a place where you can identify who is also contributing to your project and the amounts that they're contributing in. In addition, I would also add that I think letters of support from funders, partners, people who are contributing in various ways. That goes, I think, a long way in helping the reviewers understand how those folks are going to engage and why. So I would strongly encourage that if you have partners, funding, technical, whoever is helping you out with your project, you certainly want to identify if they're contributing funds under the funding and match section. Um, and then letters of support, I think, go a long way. And I know reviewers take a look at the letters of support. It's really an open opportunity for your partner to elaborate why they're a partner on the project.
We have another question in chat. What's the source of funds is the first part. I'm not totally sure I know what the context is. I think maybe what's the source of OWEB funds. So for OWEB, under technical assistance, our primary funding sources are lottery funds. And then also we can sometimes fund our technical assistance from federal Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery funds. So those are our primary funding sources. And the second that part of that question, I think we're going to hit on when we get to the wrap up because there's a question there. But the question is there an EJ, environmental justice, Justice 40 objective or state objective to serve disadvantaged / underserved communities? So I think we'll get that in the wrap up section. So we'll just hold that one.
Yeah, we will. Great question. Thanks. Okay, so we've gone through the problem statement. We've gone through the proposed solutions. Next, we're going to migrate to our wrap up section. And so regardless of what pathway you choose, whether it's technical design, engineering, or resource assessment and planning, you're going to have to fill out. This is going to be the next page in the application. And so this is what we're calling our benefits page. So we have our goals and actions page under proposed solutions, what you're going to do, how are you going to do it, why are you going to do it. And this is, your benefits. Like what are you going to, what's going to become after this investment is made. And so this first question here, we had somewhat an iteration of this question in previous applications, and we took a chance to try and figure out how we can word it more clear and offer more clarity. And essentially what we're really trying to understand is what is the fish and wildlife habitat, water quality, watershed benefit as a result of your project? So remember when I first started out in the presentation talking about how important it was for you to make a connection with your project to what we are statutorily obligated to fund with our Measure 76 which is that connection to fish, wildlife, and water quality. So this is an opportunity for you all to elaborate on what those benefits are going to be as a result of this project. Again, the I button here will have some high level, be succinct and specific in articulating those benefits. And then we have the evaluation criteria that's applicable, and then an example of how you could answer this question. Um, so I think this next question is going to get to the question we got into the comment. And so this was a question that we recently added as a result of the agency's work going through rulemaking for climate considerations. And so this next question is here's, we want to know how engagement with local communities disproportionately impacted are being engaged on your project. Um, so if you click the I button, you might be asking yourselves, well, what exactly is a community that's disproportionately impacted by climate change? And so we have an example of what that means, which is here. Um, we have the evaluation criteria that is applicable for this particular question, and then an example of how you might answer this question. And so, in a lot of the areas that I work in, small communities, rural communities impacted by wildfire, that could be certainly one. Small rural communities that are impacted by potential flooding, um, whatever it might be and is appropriate for you all. This is a space in the application where you can help us understand how those folks are being engaged as part of your project. And this next question will definitely not be a stranger to you, but what proceeds after this question will be a lot different than what you all are used to. So this is OWEB's classic question, will the project benefit salmon or steelhead? And a lot of you will remember, whether you click yes or you click no, you had a wide variety of little pop-ups that asked you about what plan is applicable, what ESU of salmon or steelhead species. Um, those are all questions associated with metrics. And as I talked about in the beginning of the application, those questions are not necessary at time of application. So we're simply asking, does the project benefit salmon or steelhead? If you click yes or if you click no, that's all you have to do. Now, if you click yes, it's possible that once your project gets funded, you will have to provide metrics associated with your project to OWEB once your project is funded. That is part of the metrics database that our IT staff is in the process of developing. And we only collect metrics for projects that have um, impacts to anadromous species. And that is because of our Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Funds that the agency receives from NOAA. And believe it or not, that's it. The next is the budget page, and this is all things we didn't touch. Like I said earlier, we definitely would like to change how this looks and operates and functions. We're not there yet. But that is the changes. Um, a couple things to highlight, just, I talked about character limits. We initially looked at all the existing character limits and cut them all in half. We had our IT folks do a query on a lot of the questions to determine what was the average responses in questions for character limits. And so we were kind of coming up on right around that halfway point as being the median average of what we were getting for responses. So we felt like we weren't really shortchanging folks opportunity to tell their story. I will say though, we went a little bit aggressive initially with slashing character limits. After some internal and external testing and feedback from folks, we actually went back and added some character limits. So the plans question was one that we added additional character limits to because we know and recognize there's a lot of plans out there. And, even though we're really, encouraging you to just put down the ones that are most relevant, specific to what you're doing, it could still take up some characters. And so we went back and added them there. And then the problem statement question. This of course is really setting the tone of why you want to do work here. So we initially had this at 4,000 and we have it now at 5,000. And so, I can't stress enough that more is not often better. And I would really encourage the approach to filling out an application that, to be clear, succinct, direct, and concise is, I think, gonna provide a lot of value, especially when it comes to the folks who are reviewing these applications. And one more thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to open it up to Liz and others, is that under the upload section is your opportunity to add PDF files to your application to help support what you're putting in the application. Maps, photographs, restoration application, could be design plans. What I would encourage you to do is not look at the upload button as just a way to add as much information as you can to your project. What we have seen is that folks flood the uploads with a number of large PDF documents. And the challenge is when our review team members download applications and the applications are pushing 300 to 400 pages and they have 25 applications to review, that is a really big lift for our review team members. And we've also noticed that a lot of times when items get uploaded, a lot of the content in the uploads are irrelevant to the specific project that you're applying for. So what I would encourage, like particularly under the plan section, if you're, let's just say, implementing a project that's identified in the Mid-Sea Columbia Plan, and you want to make sure that the reviewers know and understand how that project is benefiting the recovery of this species, I would encourage you to take that plan and get out the page 2 or 3 of that plan and upload that as a PDF. And you can cite it here in your second question. See excerpt from Mid-Columbia Sea Plan, where you can make that really clear line of how your project is implementing that item identified in the recovery plan. So I know it's really easy to upload documents and it feels good to upload a bunch of information because you maybe feel like you have a bigger, stronger package. But what I would encourage you to think through is that relevant to the project that you're applying for? If it's not, then you're asking the review team members to scan through irrelevant information that, can get a little cumbersome. And when it starts to become irrelevant information, that distracts from what people are trying to focus on, which is your specific project. Liz, did I miss anything or anything to add?
No questions. I just had a few things I was going to highlight. Can you go to the wrap up section one more time? And I just wanted to highlight that first question is really a great place when Greg was talking earlier during the slideshow part about connecting technical assistance to future restoration because of our statutory threshold. So in order for OWEB to fund technical assistance, that technical assistance must be necessary for future fish and wildlife habitat restoration, restoration of watershed functions that improves water quality or quantity. And so that benefits question at the top is really queued up for that and is a great place to tell that storyline so that reviewers can really see that rationale or those steps to the future restoration. So I just want to highlight that because that is one of the most important points to make in these projects because it is what allows us to be able to fund a project if it makes that connection. Also, we tried really hard to test this application and break it any way possible, but there's always a chance something happened that we didn't catch. And so if you look at the top right hand, there's a button that says feedback. And I do encourage folks to use that. If there's something that doesn't look right or doesn't seem to be working right, click on that and you can type in some text, and that gets emailed directly to our IT folks. And they do monitor that, especially when we have open applications. And so that gives them, they can get that feedback and they can respond to it quickly, and hopefully we can fix anything that is not working. Feedback button, also they enjoy getting positive comments. I do it too, sometimes when they surprise me with something. And so if there's something you really like and want to make sure that we keep it in the application, that's a good way to let us know about that. And then just finally, because this is a new application, I just want to emphasize anyone that's resubmitting a previous application, you will not be able to clone that previous application. We did change the version such that you won't be able to just push that clone button, and we'll have to start from scratch. But in the future, you'll be able to clone again once we keep using this application. We do now have a question in chat, Greg. What qualifies as a continuation of a previous OWEB project? Does it need to be in the same footprint of the proposed project, or would projects in the same stream subbasin qualify? So this is getting back to that section of resubmit and phased there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it probably can be answered a number of different ways. I'll take a stab at it, I guess. And I think the intent of this is that we're looking for if you received an award for a project and you didn't finish it, or you knew initially it was going to be a phased project because it was so large. This is an opportunity for you to say, hey, we've completed this amount of work with this grant at this time period, but we need additional funds because this was either phased or too big to tackle at one time, and so that's kind of what we're looking for. I don't think we're looking for an answer yes here. If you're working like in the same stream, maybe with the same actions, I think it's more revolving around the project site in particular. And if you're looking to continue or phase out additional work on that original project site, this is an opportunity to help us understand what was initially completed, and then why do we need to continue to invest here? What do you think, Liz?
I totally agree. I think you answered that well.
Okay.
And we got to thank you in chat.
Cool. I did have two more slides on the PowerPoint I want to go to just to wrap this up. Um, and so this is a new slide that we started showing our review team members the last couple cycles, and getting a lot of good praise for this. And so, your applications become a scope of work to the grant agreement. And so when we are working with you all to implement your project, um, that application, those goals, those actions, those are all part of the scope of work that is going to be delivered upon as a result of implementing your project. And so what we're reminding our review team members who are reviewing these applications is, are all these components clear in the application? Who's doing the work? What are you doing? Where are you doing it? How are you doing it? Why are you doing it? How much is it going to cost? I think Liz made a great point of connecting those actions in the project work plan table to the budget. Can reviewers make a clear line to the budget, to the project work plan table, to the actions identified? If so, that picture presumably is a lot clearer. If not, that picture might be a little bit less clear. You could also think of it if you were to hire a contractor to do some work at your house, and you probably want to know all these details to make sure you have comfortability, confidence that that contractor is going to do what you are paying them to do. And so I would just kind of reiterate, when you're going through the application, ask yourselves, is it really clear all these are being addressed in the application. So just, something that we've been sharing with our review team members, and since we have a relatively captive audience today, we wanted to make sure that this was something that we felt people were getting value out of, and we wanted to just share that with you and just kind of remind folks that the applications are the scope of work. And so when you apply and get funded and that things change, you need to come back to OWEB and have a conversation about those changes. Anything to add on here, Liz?
No, that was perfect.
Okay, our last slide here is just a reminder that we do have 3 other webinars coming up. Um, I'll be honest with you, we decided to take technical assistance first because it was the easiest application to go through. So we got one under our belts. We're gonna pick this up next Thursday. You can see these are on every Thursday here on out, 9:30 to 11. Um, and we also have what we're calling office hours. So the following week after the webinar, we're setting an hour up just to log on to Zoom and answer questions, help folks out if things didn't get addressed in the webinar that you still are feeling unsure on. This will be a good opportunity. You can pop in and ask your question and stick around or depart. It's just an opportunity for us to just be available. I think when we initially scoped out these trainings, we thought we would go out into the field and do them in person. It sounded a lot more fun to interact with folks across the state to do that, but the reality is we probably will be able to reach more folks this way. So here we are. And the office hours is just another way for us to be available to you all to help answer questions. I think anything to add there, Liz?
Nothing to add. Answer to the question of chat, will recordings of these webinars be posted online? Yes, we will be posting these online.
Yep. Yeah. So we have a YouTube page that has all the videos that OWEB puts out, and this and all these will be a part of that. The office hours will not be recorded. That's an opportunity for you to come and just kind of have a casual conversation with OWEB staff. But the webinars will be recorded.
And on that note, I'm not seeing any other chats, so I can stop recording. And we do have until 11. And so I will stop recording now.